Kale moved like smoke through the ruined outskirts of Delta Varn, a city once hailed as the jewel of trade routes, now just rust, rubble, and radiation scars. The wind carried the scent of burnt coolant, ozone, and scorched metal through the collapsed infrastructure. Overhead, the orbital grid, once a marvel of engineering, was dead. No satellites blinked. No shields pulsed. This place was abandoned by civilization and claimed by scavengers, slavers, and the desperate. He wasn't here to help anyone. Kale didn't believe in heroes. He believed in staying fed, staying warm, and staying invisible. His destination was an old tech sector known only by whispers, Zone 7E. Rumors said a power relay core still pulsed beneath a half-collapsed trade station. If he found it, he could trade it for a month's worth of synth food or recharge his fusion battery enough to keep his hideout running during the next rad storm. He climbed over a toppled access scaffold and slipped into a shadowed alley, his boots making no sound on the fractured composite pavement. Every few seconds, he scanned upward, eyes trained for heat flares or scout drones. This part of the city was mostly dead, but mostly didn't mean safe. It was near the remnants of an old ration boutique when he saw her. Hunched behind a scorched neon post, partially hidden by a cracked crate, was a girl, alien, judging by the violet tone beneath the grime on her skin and the length of her limbs. Her silver-white hair was tangled and clung to her face in thick, greasy ropes. Her garment, a torn ceremonial wrap, was caked in ash and filth. But even in ruin, something about her posture was deliberate. Upright. Steady. She didn't cry or scream. Didn't run. "If you clean me, I'll bear you strong children," she said quietly. Her voice cracked but wasn't desperate. "I swear it, human." Kale froze. He'd heard plenty of broken people offer worse for less. Trading their dignity for heat coils, synthetic bars, or a few hours of protection. But this wasn't that. It wasn't the words that caught him. It was how she said them, like she wasn't bargaining out of fear, but offering terms in a negotiation she'd made many times before. He scanned the area. No tags on her wrists, no slaver collars, no ownership bands. But he spotted it, the faint, curling ink patterns around her hips and thighs, partially hidden beneath grime. Valari noble marks. Old ones. High-caste breeding lines, if he remembered right. That meant she hadn't grown up in a cage. She was discarded. "What happened to your group?" he asked. Her throat flexed. "Dead. Or sold." Kale's grip on his satchel tightened. He didn't rescue people. Didn't pick up strays. That kind of compassion would get you killed in Delta Varn. But something about her, maybe her stillness, maybe the quiet dignity in her grime-caked face, made him speak. "I've got shelter. Not comfortable. Not safe. But better than here. I'll come. You can't walk far on that leg." "I'll walk." He shrugged out of his outer jacket and tossed it near her. "Put that on." She took it with trembling fingers and wrapped it around herself, tightening it with the inner straps. No wasted motion. No words. Kale turned and began walking. She followed without needing to be told. The route to his bunker was a jagged maze, through a derailed tram shaft, down into a collapsed lift tunnel, and finally into the metro maintenance ducts. By the time they reached the sealed hatch, her breathing was shallow and her limp worse. When the hatch hissed open, she nearly collapsed. Kale caught her under the arms and lowered her inside. The shelter was buried deep, reinforced metal walls patched with scrap plating, a salvaged heater coil buzzing in one corner, and a half-functioning Deccan shower rigged from an old terraform station. It wasn't home. It was a survival cube. He guided her to the mat, then handed her a sealed foam canister. "Industrial-grade cleaner. Use it in the stall. Don't touch your eyes." She tried to stand and faltered. "I'll help," he muttered. She didn't argue. Kale led her into the stall. Foam hissed out in a chemical cloud. She tensed under the first spray, her back arching instinctively. He worked quickly, gloved hands spreading the solvent across her skin. Layers of grime ran off her in gray streaks, revealing violet skin underneath, smooth in places, scarred in others. Old burns, faint surgical lines, the outline of noble tattoos. She didn't cry. Didn't tremble. When he was done, she pulled the rinse lever herself. The water was barely warm, but she stood under it like a statue, eyes closed. She emerged wrapped in a clean thermal blanket, her hair wet and combed back roughly. She looked different now. Not clean. Not new. But clear. Her gaze was sharp. Kale handed her a spare shirt. She took it and tied it tight around her waist. They sat near the heater. He cracked a ration pack and split it. She ate slowly, methodically. Then met his eyes. "I meant what I said," she said. He didn't answer immediately. She wasn't trying to flirt. Wasn't baiting him. She was simply surviving the only way she'd been taught. He leaned back, stared at the heater coil. "I'm not that kind of man." She nodded, not as insult, but understanding. "Then why help me?" Kale looked at her. "I don't know." Silence stretched. Outside, the city groaned as metal shifted in the wind. Inside, they sat close enough to feel the heat on their skin. Two strangers, breathing the same air, each pretending not to wonder what the other would do next. The bunker was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt thicker than silence. The kind that stretched between people who weren't ready to speak, but couldn't avoid each other either. Kale sat with his back against the far wall, arms draped loosely over his knees. His eyes kept drifting to the girl, Syrah, she'd said once under her breath, like it might not even matter anymore. She was curled near the heater, knees tucked under the oversized thermal blanket. Her white-silver hair, now clean, clung to her shoulder in damp braids. Her skin had a faint glow, bioluminescence along her collarbone and wrists, something unique to her kind, the Valari. She wasn't trembling anymore. She wasn't watching the door like she expected it to burst open. She was just, there. Still. Kale cleared his throat. "You meant it? About the children?" Syrah didn't even flinch. "Yes." "Why that offer?" She looked up, her face unreadable in the low light. "Because people don't save you unless you're useful. And there's only one kind of usefulness they still see in people like me." Kale didn't argue. He'd seen it. Delta Varn had no place for hope anymore. People bartered bodies, loyalty, even memories, just to make it one more week. He'd walked past it all, learned to stop seeing. He exhaled. "Where were you from before all this?" "Upper Tower District. Before it fell." His brow lifted slightly. "That was Core Registry territory. I was part of the genetic pair program. My bonding was scheduled 3 cycles early. You were a noble." "I was," she confirmed without pride. "What happened?" "I said no." The air shifted. "They assigned me a mate. Political match. Meant to secure a breeding pact between human colonies and Valari enclaves. I refused." Kale stared. "Refusal is disobedience. Disobedience gets you discarded. If you're lucky. Repurposed?" Syrah nodded. "There are labs that still take noble lines. Even after the Accords broke. I didn't wait to find out which cage they'd put me in." Kale rubbed his hands together slowly. The tattoos, he'd seen them earlier, weren't for ceremony. They were legacy markers, spirals etched into the skin to trace lineages. Whoever she was, she hadn't just walked away from privilege. She'd walked out on an entire future written for her. "You've been alone since?" "Yes. I knew the tunnels. I traded sometimes. Hid. Ran. Then the market burned. I lost everything. Kale stood and walked to the old supply locker. He pulled out a water pouch and handed it to her. It's clean. Don't gulp. Syrah drank carefully. Her fingers were steadier than they'd been an hour ago. Kale watched her movements, controlled, deliberate. I'm not going to make you earn your place here, he said. She didn't look surprised. Most would have. Or resold me. He sat back down, his expression hard to read. I've seen too many trades like that end ugly. Doesn't make me a hero. Just means I've learned. Then why did you help me? Kale hesitated. Because no one else would. That landed heavier than he expected. She looked away, and for a second her breath hitched, just once, but she didn't cry. She didn't soften. She just kept breathing. The heater hummed quietly, the recycled air thick with dry heat and old metal. After a while, Kale opened his gear pack and started checking the contents. A spliced coil. An old transmitter unit. A bundle of synthetic wiring he hoped to trade. You planning to stay long? He asked, not looking up. If I leave, I'll be hunted. Hunted by who? Slavers. Warlords. Anyone with a scanner and a buyer waiting. Kale ran a hand down his face. That was the problem. The second someone figured out she was free, untagged, and high value, the price on her head would climb fast. She wasn't just an alien. She was a living investment. You're not marked, he noted. Not yet. But if they find me. He nodded. Then we make sure they don't. She blinked slowly. You're going to help me. Kale didn't answer. You already are, she added. He stood and moved to the control panel on the wall, adjusting the power draw so external scans would show no energy spike. They needed to look like just another dead zone. He rerouted the ambient heat bleed through old ductwork and activated dummy sensors to scatter his trail. Behind him, Syrah's voice followed softly. I don't need you to want me. But if you let me stay, I'll find a way to be useful. Useful doesn't mean offering yourself. I know, she said. They didn't speak again that night. Kale laid down on his mat, turned toward the wall. Syrah stayed near the heater, her blanket wrapped tight around her shoulders. Eventually, she curled up near the far corner, eyes still open. It wasn't trust yet. But it was proximity. A beginning. Kale barely slept. He listened through the pipes for any signs of movement above. Scanners. Drones. Slavers. Nothing. But that didn't mean they were safe. The next morning, the filtration system hissed to life. Cold, metallic air trickled through the vents. No sunlight. Just the dim flicker of the console light, blinking steadily. Syrah was still curled near the heater, hair fanned across her shoulder, the oversized shirt wrapped tightly around her frame. Kale stood, moved to the terminal, and pulled up the night's external logs. 3 drone sweeps. Heat scanners. Low frequency. Militia or freelancers. They were getting close. He didn't have to guess why. You didn't sleep, her voice said from behind. Didn't plan to. She sat up slowly. Her posture was more alert this morning. Not scared. Just aware. They tracked me. Kale nodded. Last night. Got within 100 meters. They're running passive scans for now. But if they catch a signal. They will. He turned to her. You're worth a lot. She didn't flinch. I know. He tapped the side console. That comm's been dead for weeks. But if I can tap into the old satellite relay, I can send a burst signal, a fake distress ping. Draw them off. I can help, she said, moving beside him. With what? Syrah pulled open the relay housing with a flick of her fingers. These models are old Valari make. My family designed the early bond comm protocols. Kale blinked. He stepped aside. She worked fast. Calm. No wasted motion. The panel flickered to life under her touch, briefly showing the Valari crest before switching to manual override. Kale watched her, not just surviving now, but working. Most people think Valari women are just breeders, she said, eyes on the interface. Ceremonial. Obedient. But we trained in systems, too. Especially those of noble lines. You were meant for diplomacy, Kale guessed. She nodded. My mate would have been a consort liaison. Cross-species negotiation. I refused it. And made yourself a target. Yes. The panel pinged. Fake signal set. It'll fire from a relay tower near the wreck zone. Should shift their search pattern. Kale exhaled. Nice work. I told you I could be useful. He didn't reply. But as he looked at her, really looked, he didn't see a refugee anymore. He saw a partner. They didn't have time to breathe easy. Within the hour, the motion sensors flickered again, another sweep, this one tighter, more deliberate. Someone had caught a trail. A glimmer of heat, a static discharge, a chemical trace from the foam cleanser she'd used, something. Kale and Syrah locked eyes across the bunker. No need for words. They both knew what it meant. They had to move. Fast. Kale opened the floor panel, revealing a narrow access shaft, barely wide enough to crawl through, lined with corroded insulation and the black moldy stench of long-dead water lines. Think you'll fit? He asked. Syrah crouched without hesitation. I'll make it fit. She slung Kale's secondary satchel over her shoulder, grabbed the makeshift baton he handed her, and dropped into the vent behind him. Kale went first, flashlight clipped to his collar, casting a narrow beam through the duck's rusted guts. The metal groaned under their weight. Every shift of fabric or scrape of boot sounded too loud, like a broadcast. But no one spoke. No one needed to. They crawled through the skeleton of Delta Varn. An underworld maze built for maintenance crews who'd long since abandoned their posts. The walls dripped with condensation from old ruptured pipes. Slime clung to the floor. It reeked of mildew, rot, and stale coolant. Kale kept count of the turns, left, down, right, until they dropped into what used to be an air purification bay. The chamber was cracked open like a broken lung. Filter grids hung in tatters from the ceiling. This way, he muttered. They moved quickly through the debris. Footsteps, precise. Controlled. Syrah kept up without complaint. He noticed the limp again, worse now, but she didn't slow. Half an hour later, they entered a wide industrial tunnel, the old magrail path. It was littered with scrap, collapsed supports, and the husk of a derailed transport car. We rest here, Kale said, gesturing to the broken shell. Syrah nodded, climbed inside, and sank to the floor. Her breathing was shallow. One foot was bleeding, heel torn from metal debris. Kale knelt beside her. Let me see. She didn't argue. He pulled out a medrip from his pack and wrapped her foot in a soft gel band. She winced once but said nothing. You've done this before, she said quietly. Used to work disaster relief. Back before it all fell apart. She looked at him, studying his face in the low light. What did you lose? She asked. He hesitated. Wife. 2 years ago. Tower collapse. Pressure breach. No warning. Just, gone. Syrah didn't speak. She just placed her hand near his, not touching, but close enough that the warmth passed between them. You don't have to fix me, she said. I wasn't. I know. I just need you to know, that first offer I made, It wasn't because I thought I was good for it. It was the only thing I had left to trade. Kale looked at her, really looked. The grime was gone. The terror too. What remained was something quiet but resilient. "You're not a trade," he said. "You could have walked away," she whispered. "But I didn't." And for a moment, neither of them was scavenger or fugitive. Just two people at the edge of exhaustion, clinging to what remained. Then the silence broke. A sharp metallic sound echoed through the tunnel, measured footsteps. Kale was up instantly. Flashlight off. Pistol drawn. A silhouette emerged at the far end of the tunnel. Human. Light armor. Pulse rifle. And a scanner. Not a slaver. Not militia. A bounty hunter. Kale pulled Syrah behind the broken car's shell. The man stopped 10 meters out, raising the scanner again. "I don't want the human," he called out. "Just the girl. She's tagged. Abandoned cargo. Trade law says she's fair claim." Kale didn't answer. "I'm offering you a clean exit," the hunter continued. "You hand her over, I walk. Your payout's guaranteed." Kale's grip tightened. The power cell in his pistol was nearly drained. "One clean shot, maybe two." "I don't do trades," Kale said. The hunter raised his weapon. "Then you die for nothing." A moment of stillness. Then, from beside him, Syrah whispered one word. "Duck." Kale dropped instantly. Syrah stepped forward, arms out. She let out a low hum, resonant, harmonic, almost musical. The sound vibrated through the tunnel like a pulse wave. An emergency drone embedded in the ceiling, long dormant, flared to life. Its targeting system blinked red. It fired. Not lethal, just a flash burst. But it was enough. The hunter staggered, blinded. Kale surged up and fired once. The pulse hit center mass. Armor cracked. The man dropped. Smoke filled the tunnel. The drone sputtered and died. Syrah was shaking. Her breathing sharp and shallow. Kale turned to her. "What was that?" "Old override code. Defense cast command frequency." He stared at her. "You're not just ceremonial. I was raised for bonding. Trained for war." Kale nodded slowly. "Good. Because that won't be the last one." They didn't linger. Kale led them down a maintenance ramp and into another level, a hydroponic chamber buried deep in the city's old infrastructure. He'd found it weeks ago but left it sealed. Now, it was their only safe zone. The dome loomed ahead, glass cracked but intact. Overgrowth blanketed the entry hatch. Kale pulled it aside and entered a code. The door hissed open. "Go," he told her. Syrah climbed down first, bare feet moving carefully on the rungs. Kale followed, sealing the hatch behind them. Warm, recycled air enveloped them. The hydroponics were long dead. Vines curled like skeletons around the walls. The air stank of rust and dust. But it was shelter. Safe. For now. Syrah slumped against a dry irrigation trough. Kale moved around the chamber, checking seals, reinforcing latches, setting up motion alarms. Only when everything was in place did he finally sit across from her and hand over a ration bar and a water pack. She took them, hands steady. "No thanks." No words. Just shared silence. Burned silence. Later, she looked up. "What you said, back in the tunnel. About not doing trades. It was true." She studied him. "Then why take me with you?" Kale leaned back, staring at the cracked ceiling. "Because I've seen what this place does to people. Turns them into scavengers and beasts. I've walked past people before, people crying for help. I kept going. But you weren't crying. You weren't begging. You looked at me like you still had something left. She lowered her gaze. I didn't want to lose the last thing I had. What was that? Myself. Kale nodded slowly. For a long time, they didn't speak. Then quietly, Syrah asked, "Do you miss her?" "My wife?" She nodded. Kale's jaw tensed. "Every day. But I don't dream about her anymore." The grief changed. "It's not loud. It just follows me now. I don't have anyone left to miss." "You do now," he said. Her eyes lifted. They didn't touch. Didn't lean in. But she let her hand rest next to his on the cool floor. Their fingers brushed. And for the first time, Kale didn't pull away. The greenhouse dome was still. Sunlight filtered weakly through cracked alloy glass panels overhead, streaking pale gold across dust-covered irrigation channels. Kale stood by the rusted console at the edge of the chamber, running diagnostics on what little power remained in the dome's solar core. One battery was blown. The other flickered to life just enough to keep the emergency lights on. Syrah sat nearby, wrapped in a thermal blanket that she no longer clutched like a shield. Her hair, finally dry, was braided over one shoulder. Her violet skin shimmered faintly under the ambient light, glowing not with fear or panic, but calm. Steady. For the first time since Kale had found her huddled in the alley, she wasn't looking over her shoulder. And that terrified him. He checked the signal monitors again. The fake distress call had bought them hours, maybe a day, but nothing more. Slavers. Freelancers. Mercs. They'd come eventually. He crossed the dome, crouched beside Syrah, and handed her a small power bar and a sealed water pack. She took them quietly. He sat beside her. After a few minutes, she said, "I'm not asking for anything. I know what this is." Kale turned his head. "I just don't want to be alone. Not tonight." He nodded. "You're not." That night, they lay beside each other on a shared mat under the warmest corner of the dome. Not close out of desperation. Close by choice. Her head rested lightly near his shoulder. Their arms touched. She said nothing. Neither did he. But when she turned her face up to him, eyes clear, lips soft, he didn't hesitate. Her kiss was slow. Not a transaction. Not a plea. Just, connection. He kissed her back. And for once, there was no past. No grief. Just breath and warmth. And silence. They didn't dream that night. Kale woke early. The quiet buzz of the air recycler filtered through the dome. No alarms. No motion. Syrah still slept beside him, her arm draped over his chest, her breath warm on his collarbone. She looked younger in rest. Softer. Like she hadn't spent weeks crawling through rubble and blood. Kale didn't move for a long time. He just watched her. For the first time since the fall of Delta Varn, he felt something close to peace. Then the red light blinked on the console. Perimeter breach. Kale slipped from under the blanket carefully, quietly. Crossed the dome in 5 strides and checked the display. Movement outside. 4 figures. Heavy steps. Not drones. He turned sharply. Syrah sat up instantly. Alert. "What is it?" she asked. 4. Just outside. Militia? Maybe. Or slavers who caught the echo trail. This dome doesn't have a back exit. I know. She moved to the crates, already dressing in the loose shirt she'd used as makeshift clothing. "I'll lead them away," she said. Kale turned. "What?" "They're after me. My signal. I can take them down the old water systems." You stay here. Hide out until they pass. No. It's logical. Syrah. You didn't bring me to die. I know that. But I'm not going to let you die for me either. He stepped closer. You're not a liability. You're not something to protect. You're someone. You don't get to decide this alone. Her jaw tightened. Then what? We make a stand. She blinked. Here, Kale said. You're serious. We reroute the power grid. Overload the heating coils. Set a mist field to scatter visibility. We draw them into the center and disorient them. And then we fight. Syrah stared at him for a long moment. That might kill you. He gave a crooked, tired smile. Better than watching you walk out alone. She inhaled deeply. Then we do it together. They moved quickly. Kale rigged the greenhouse's remaining solar core into an overload loop, timing it with the misting unit Syrah activated from the irrigation tanks. The chemicals were non-lethal, but they'd refract light, blur optics, and distort human vision. Syrah aligned the flare burst, an old emergency signal launcher Kale had scavenged months ago, to fire against the inner curve of the dome ceiling. They crouched behind a reinforced irrigation duct. Kale's pistol was clutched tight in his hand. Syrah held the flare trigger. Footsteps echoed above. Then the hiss of a plasma cutter at the hatch. They're coming, Kale whispered. Syrah nodded once. 3 seconds after breach. The hatch slammed open. Figures dropped down, 4 of them. Armor. Black masks. Pulse rifles up. One raised a scanner. Lights out. Flare burst. Blinding white light flooded the dome, bouncing off the mist like lightning. Shadows dissolved. Shape stretched and vanished. The hunters shouted in confusion. Kale fired. 2 shots missed. One hit center chest. A body dropped. The remaining attackers fired wildly. One hit a coolant pipe, steam exploded into the chamber. Syrah moved low and fast. Baton in hand. She struck one in the knee, then slammed the side of the helmet. The man fell. Kale wrestled the last attacker, grappling through steam and flickering light. The man twisted his arm back, gun slipping from his grip. But Kale struck hard, elbow to jaw, and fired once. Point blank. The sound cracked through the dome. Then silence. Just the hiss of steam and the soft hum of the core resetting. Syrah crouched beside Kale, panting. You hurt? She asked. He shook his head. Bruised. Not broken. He scanned the dome. 4 bodies. All down. They were still alive. For now. Kale slumped back against the duct. I would have done it again, he said softly. Taken you in. She sat beside him, her hand resting near his. I would have asked again. Even if you'd said no the first time. Their fingers brushed. They didn't speak again. But that night, when the dome was quiet and the threat finally over, Kale didn't sleep alone. And he didn't want to. The quiet that followed wasn't peaceful. It was the silence that clings to places where violence has just passed, where the air still remembers the noise. Kale moved through the dome like a ghost, sealing the hatch, dragging the fallen bodies into the corner, covering them with an old thermal sheet. He'd burn them later, outside, once the mist cleared and the atmosphere vents stopped cycling the chemical haze. For now, he had to make the dome livable again. One solar battery remained functional. Barely. He ran diagnostics, rerouted power to the shield nodes, and disconnected a few old circuits to preserve juice for heating. Syrah sat by the wall in the patch of light filtering through a cracked panel, wrapped in a clean blanket, hair braided back, skin marked with fading bruises, but calm. She was watching him. Not nervously. Not in fear. Just, watching. When he finally turned toward her, she stood and walked barefoot across the chilled dome floor. The blanket slipped from her shoulders. She placed one hand gently on his chest. "You don't have to fix everything today," she said. He looked down at her. "We have to be ready." "We do. But I need you here. Just for a moment. With me." Kale hesitated, then stepped away from the console. The power hum faded into the background. Syrah's fingers stayed against his chest. "You could have walked away. You should have. Maybe even wanted to. I tried. And I begged." He shook his head slowly. "You didn't beg. You survived." She smiled faintly. "Back then, when I said I'd give you children if you cleaned me, I didn't really understand what I was offering. I was scared. Covered in dirt. Trying to seem useful. I thought it was the only card I had left." He nodded. "But you didn't take what I offered," she continued. "You gave something back. You gave safety. Choice." Kale looked at her and let the silence sit for a long time before answering. "What I want now isn't survival," he said. "It's you. If you'll stay." "I will," she said, without hesitation. She leaned in and kissed him again, not a question, not a test. A decision. Later, they moved side by side through the dome, scavenging what they could from the fallen attackers. Kale used their equipment to reinforce the perimeter: tripwire sensors, low-power alarms, motion scramblers. Syrah stripped their armor for usable plates, melted down bits of polymer for repair patches. They repaired the greenhouse frame with scavenged mesh and thermal sealant. It wouldn't hold forever, but it was safer than anything outside. Each night, they lay beneath the old dome lights in the warmest part of the chamber. Not curled from fear anymore. Just close. Familiar. Their breath soft in the recycled air. And every morning, they rose before the sun touched the cracked ceiling, working in silence, broken only by brief words and softer glances. On the sixth day, Syrah sat cross-legged near a salvaged datapad Kale had pulled from a downed relay drone. Her fingers slid across the cracked glass, navigating ancient Valari records encoded in her native script. "You know," she said, "some of these ceremonial codes, they weren't just for bonding." Kale glanced up from where he was adjusting the hydro pump wiring. "No." She shook her head. "Some were used for voluntary unions. Not state-sanctioned. Not arranged. Just, chosen. Two people sharing space. Declaring one another. Sounds like marriage. Not exactly. But close. You live together. You accept responsibility for each other. You speak the name of the one you've chosen if a council ever asks." Kale stood and walked over to her. She held up the pad, showing him a looping sigil written in curling lines of old script. "What's it mean?" She looked up at him, her voice quiet but steady. "It means, we chose freely." Kale took the pad and looked at it. Then knelt in front of her. "I choose you," he said. "I chose you," she replied, almost a whisper. He touched her face. She leaned into it, eyes closed. For a long time, they stayed that way, foreheads pressed together, breathing the same air. Nothing left to run from. Nothing left to prove. Just presence. When she finally spoke again, her voice had softened to something fragile but strong. "Now I can give you something," she said. "Not because I must. But because I want to." Kale didn't answer. He just held her. And in that moment, there was no past. No broken promises. No price on her head. Only them. Alive. Together. For the first time, the dome didn't feel like a hiding place. It felt like home. Out here, in the ruins of what the galaxy forgot, two people found something no one thought existed anymore: choice. Not barter. Not duty. Not survival. Just the power to choose each other. Kale had spent years believing he couldn't care again. That caring meant bleeding. That trust was a shortcut to loss. He buried that truth so deep, he forgot it could be rewritten. Syrah had been raised to believe she was a function. A tool. A vessel for diplomacy. Her worth measured in lineage, obedience, compliance. But when she walked away, when she refused what had been written for her, she didn't just become a fugitive. She became free. And freedom is terrifying. But together, they built something else. Not a kingdom. Not a rebellion. Just shelter. Just love. And in this dead city's forgotten dome, they wrote a new kind of future. One without ownership. One where being alive didn't mean being owned. It meant being seen. And they chose to see each other. If you made it this far into the story, thank you. These kinds of tales, set in ash-covered cities with broken people trying to stitch together something human, are the ones that stick with us. They remind us that even in the dark, warmth survives. So if this story meant something to you, tap that like button, subscribe for more sci-fi storytelling, and share it with someone who'd appreciate a little hope in a hopeless world. And remember, the future doesn't belong to the ones who wait. It belongs to the ones who choose.